When experiencing deep suffering, the brain builds a survival story. Over time, a narrative like, "I am broken," gains high precision weighting, locking into a rigid mental structure. Standard therapy often attempts aggressive intervention, pushing against this knot to force a breakthrough. But a heavily armored ego automatically rejects data that contradicts its survival story. And when the person is fused to that story, external arguments or forced empathy feel like an attack. The system responds by tightening its defenses even further. Because this pressure causes the knot to resist, loud attempts to fix trauma usually reinforce the exact problem they are trying to untie. At this point, the facilitator is no longer working for the participant. They are merely performing a role, using activity to mask their own inability to sit with the silence of the room. There is an alternative that looks less like a wizard and more like a trickster coyote. Instead of pushing for a revelation, you step back. You lower the precision of the entire room. You offer an open hand instead of a diagnostic lever. You don't ask how they're feeling or what they might know. Ask them to feel the chair, nice and slow. Feel feet on the floor and notice the drifting light. This rhythmic pacing acts as a biological anchor. Human nervous systems naturally co-regulate. If you maintain a quiet, grounded baseline, the other person's system eventually reads that field and begins to match it. Regulation happens long before cognitive meaning arrives. This shift is called the somatic pivot. By moving questions away from internal identity and toward the physical, autopoietic body, you bypass the ego's defenses. You aren't asking the who, you are acknowledging the organism. Asking about the color of the light or the temperature of the air forces a mechanical gap in the trauma narrative. To answer, the brain must briefly drop the propositional layer of the story to engage with the immediate sensory reality of the room. This allows for titration. In high-stakes environments, you don't dive into the flood. You interact with the heavy material one tiny drop at a time, swinging between the internal edge and present safety. This pendulate and return motion discharges stuck energy, completing biological cycles interrupted by trauma, without requiring the subject to narrate the past. Recovery occurs in these unmarked gaps of physical presence. When the system is no longer forced to perform for a facilitator, it can finally use that energy to update its model of the world. But there is a danger in loosening. If a facilitator moves too fast, they can unmoor a fragile system. The mind can drift too far, resulting in a ceiling breach, a state of total disconnection known as dissociation. You see it in the flat, mask-like stare, or a sudden, non-narrative trembling in the hands. The self-model has loosened beyond what the person can tolerate. They aren't in the room anymore. They are flooded. In these moments, the facilitator must immediately execute the safety inversion. You stop all loosening. You do not ask about the body or the silence. You reverse the vector and work to raise precision. You provide a physical object to hold. You state the exact day, the time, and the location. You issue a simple binary choice, water or coffee, anything that forces the system to re-precify and anchor itself in the concrete world. Stability often relies on finding the edges. When a person has unmoored, the most compassionate move is to help them discover that there are walls. When the tension in the room finally drops and the person's posture changes, the facilitator must follow the manual's most difficult rule: do absolutely nothing. Do not name what just happened, and do not offer congratulations. Labeling a shift allows the rigid self-model to capture it. The ego simply gathers the experience and wears it as a new spiritual achievement costume. By naming the change, you allow the old structure to reconsolidate around it. This discipline requires the power of subtraction. You rely on your own steady nervous system to hold the field, refusing to add the weight of your own approval or interpretation to the participant's experience. Remaining an undefended, quiet presence, without the need to be a savior, is the highest form of the craft. In this context, helping often looks like a refusal to interfere. Durable change rarely looks like a cinematic revelation. It is characterized by shifts that are deliberately unimpressive. Success is found when a silence that used to be unbearable becomes inhabitable. It's visible when a participant who used to flee difficult moments chooses to stay in the chair, or when the physical load-bearing shrug finally starts to soften. You watch the light, you feel the floor, you let the breath go through. Stay curious and kind. The goal of this work is not to transform into a new person. It is simply to become slightly more available to the mechanical fact of your own continuing existence.